What's going on, folks? Eddie Carrington, Mayor of Flux City, and today we are reacting to yet another RFP issued out by the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation. And this site is over in Southwest Detroit. It's a bit more manageable in comparison to the former golf course in Northwest Detroit, which is 22 acres, whereas this location in Southwest Detroit, it's a 6.1 acre site, a really good location. It's along the busy West Corridor, or West Vernor Corridor to be more exact. And I am a big fan of that neighborhood. There's so much to be said about Southwest Detroit, but with the right concept, this could be a really good win from a developer's perspective if you're able to accomplish and hit a home run with it. But I'm also very interested in this site, thinking about putting together a proposal for this RFP. But even with that said, I would love to kind of talk through certain details with you and go over this opportunity so you have knowledge as to what opportunities there are as a developer within the city of Detroit, specifically when we're talking about working with entities such as DEGC, which comes with a different level of support in comparison to a project that may be listed for sale by owner. This is an RFP that the city of Detroit is spending a little bit more time, energy, and effort on in order to hopefully get it to the starting line, which is the close of the construction loan and actually shovels in the ground, and eventually being able to service the clientele over in that community, which is the community itself, which is the neighbors that live, walk, bike the West Vernor Corridor on a daily basis. So let's get into it. This is a pretty big site, even though it's smaller than the 22 acreage RFP that released. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of land.
Hi, I'm David Howell, Vice President of Real Estate Services for the Detroit Economic Growth.
What's up, David?
6370 West Vernor in Detroit, Michigan is a prime 6.1 acre site, the largest publicly owned site in the thriving Southwest Detroit neighborhood. Strategically positioned at a key intersection along the West Vernor Corridor, this site is close to the Gordie Howe Bridge.
This looks like it's close to some train tracks, which could open up other opportunities for the developer with the right concept. I'm not exactly sure if those tracks are live and active. I'm assuming that they are, but if so, that gives even more opportunity once again for the right proposal with the right partnership, depending on certain variables.
The Ambassador Bridge, and major highways including I-75, I-94, and I-96.
I have lived in Southwest since I was 2 years old. It's constantly changing, and what was once full and bustling has depleted some, but our folks are still around, needing a space to go into. We could use storefronts, we could use an incubator, we could use apartments on top where you can live.
Just 14 minutes away.
So the council member mentioned a number of things. She obviously has her ears to the street and understands the community more so than a lot of us do, because she hears from the constituents on a pretty consistent basis. But she mentioned mixed use, she mentioned apartments, she mentioned incubator. That in turn gives us some idea as to what the community may want, on top of potentially the master plan that the city has done in this area a few years back, which we'll talk about as well.
Away from downtown Detroit, and only 8 minutes away from the newly renovated 14 minutes away from downtown Detroit.
14 minutes away from downtown Detroit. That's still a pretty decent travel time to get from this site to downtown Detroit. You can pretty much get downtown from most everywhere in the city of Detroit in around 15 to 20 minutes. And so 14 minutes, although that might sound like a pretty quick travel, that's roughly around the typical travel time when it comes to pretty much any neighborhood in the city to get to downtown Detroit.
and only 8 minutes away from the newly renovated $950 million Michigan Central Station. This location is ideal for a development project that can complement the investments already made in the area.
District 6 is incredibly diverse and beautiful. We have people from literally all over the world, and we have been able to support each other through our gifts, our talents. So for me, our community, our people is what makes us special. It would mean that our people that come with their talents and their gifts will be able to have a space, an incubator space, to help them grow, help them learn, help them expand.
So this is the second time we've heard the word incubator space. So keep that in mind if you're considering putting a play together for this site.
We have so many incredible businesses and small entrepreneurs that need a space to be able to develop their tamales, their chips, their salsas, their blankets, whatever it is that they make. So giving them opportunity, a space to be able to produce and create that, to have them start.
A lot of space to activate. It's a pretty big plot of land. There may be opportunity for a multi-phased development due to the amount of property that you have access to here, or there may be an opportunity to knock it out the park with just one phase. It just all depends on what your plan and what your capital stack looks like.
And then grow to allow somebody else to come back is something that would be incredibly beneficial to District 6 in the city, the state, quite frankly. I don't think you'll find any difficulty at all finding retail establishments, finding entrepreneurs to fill this space. If anything, we don't have enough space to fill with our folks.
We are seeking a visionary business owner or development with experience in successfully completing high-quality development.
So David mentioned something, an experienced business owner. So maybe there is an actual business that is looking to expand into the Southwest Detroit neighborhood to a point where maybe this isn't a typical development team. Maybe there is a business that says, hey, look, we need another location. This location makes sense. The city of Detroit is willing to work with us on this site for one reason or one way or another, whether it be potentially lowering the sales price of the site, connecting us with the funding partners that we need in order to get this project to the closing table, and or even providing funding for the right opportunity, tax abatements, you name it. And so David mentions this. He didn't mention that in the larger 22 acreage site RFP
project. This isn't just a property play. It's your opportunity to be part of Detroit's next exciting chapter.
All right, so where do we find the proposal? On DEGC's website. So we're going to go to degc.org, scroll down a little bit, click on request for proposals, and we're going to scroll down and click on real estate and land development, and we're going to click on 6370 West Vernor development site. And here it is in black and white. This gives us an opportunity to understand what the low level details about this site are, as well as what the city is looking for from a development team, and gives us a lot of good information about the neighborhood. One thing to point out is the amount of money the city of Detroit and its philanthropic and corporate partners have invested over $25 million to date. That's a lot of money, right? $25 million to date has been invested in this community through the Strategic Neighborhood Fund. And that means that there potentially may be more dollars due to the focal point that the city has had in this corridor, in this area as of recent. And this is a good thing as a developer, because 95% of the projects that are happening in the city of Detroit require some type of subsidy. And the Strategic Neighborhood Fund really helps to fill those gaps that you're going to be guaranteed to have when it comes to redeveloping sites from the ground up, such as this one. Another thing to point out is that this site is zoned M4, which really gives a lot of flexibility, especially when you pair the zoning with variances and and things of that nature. So let's look into the M4 zone really quickly here. This district will permit uses which are usually objectionable, and therefore the district is rarely, if ever, located adjacent to residential districts. So legal marijuana operational or grow facilities are allowed in M4 zones. Strip clubs are allowed in M4 zones. You could incorporate nightclubs and even pet cemeteries in this zone. You can do boiler repair. You can do a number of things that aren't necessarily typical in your other traditional zones that we're more or less familiar with. One thing to point out, a broad range of uses is permitted in this district. New residences are prohibited with the exception of loft conversions of existing buildings and of residential uses combined with structures with permitted commercial uses. Gives you flexibility to add residential housing to the allowed uses from the commercial side. These requirements are to protect residences from an undesirable environment and to ensure reservation of adequate areas for industrial development. Here are the by right uses: contractor yard, landscaper construction, motor vehicles, new storage lot accessory to sales room or sales lots for the new motor vehicles, bake shop / retail, art gallery, blueprinting shop, boiler repair, laundry or industrial, construction equipment, heavy equipment repair or service, machine shop, outdoor storage yard, pet cemetery, trade services, welding shops. One thing to note is, from my understanding, if you were to incorporate housing on top of one of these by right uses, there are certain things that you cannot enforce. For an example, the housing may or may not allow for you to police noise pollution. For an example, somebody could have their stereo system booming in their unit, and due to the M4 zoning, they may have that ability to play their music as loud as they want to without the need to be mindful of other neighbors. And so, it can get a bit wonky and challenging depending on how you kind of structure the overall site and what variances are approved and what commercial concept you have incorporated in the overall site. But I am definitely not an architect. I don't know code as much as a trained professional does. And so if you're interested in doing a little more research on M4, definitely reach out to somebody with a lot more experience than I have. For the neighborhood context, this is one of Detroit's densest, most walkable areas. It has a 77 walk score, strong Latin American cultural influence, young population, many residents under the age of 18, a very, very vibrant Vernor retail corridor with low vacancy. The Southwest dollar that is earned by the residents usually stays in Southwest. So it gets recycled within the community a lot more effectively than you see outside of this neighborhood within the city of Detroit. And a lot of the neighborhoods within the city, the dollar that is earned by the resident finds itself outside of that community in a very short period of time. Southfield, Oak Park, Novi, Allen Park, a lot of people who live and even work in the city of Detroit don't spend their money in the city of Detroit. But when you're looking at the details of the Southwest Detroit resident, once again, these residents spend their money where they live. They have pretty much everything they need within this community, with the exception of, and this is something that a buddy of mine, Marcel, pointed out, like linen, like bath cloths and towels and things of that nature. But that, weirdly enough, is one of the few things that they have to go outside of the neighborhood for. It's also 2 miles from the Gordie Howe International Bridge that is newly constructed, 2 miles from Michigan Central Innovation Hub, adjacent to Detroit International Freight Terminal. So if you got a concept for trucking and incorporating freight, there could be opportunity there. And once again, there has been over $25 million through the Strategic Neighborhood Fund invested in this community. The site was a former Department of Public Works facility for 56 years. And so they're actually doing some remediation, and it sounds like that potentially will be done by the time the property switches hands. So soil removal, groundwater monitoring, and slab/foundation demolition, which for a developer is that's really a big deal, because if you're taking out the old foundation and you're dealing with the potential contaminated soil, that really does save a decent amount of groundwork that we as a developer would have to do. Imagine, digging up the site to get ready to pour footings, and these previous footings from who knows how long ago are still in the ground and in the way of you being able to provide a solid foundation for your new building or buildings on the site. That could be costly. And so if the city is actually going through the process of doing some of that work for you, that could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, depending on how bad, the old foundation, kind of encompassed, this 6-acre site. As we start digging into the details of the proposal, the DEGC gives us a few more tidbits to be mindful of. Looking at the 4 statement here, a broad range of industrial uses are permitted. However, given the site's location on a retail corridor and the proximity of residential uses, we are encouraging light industrial, light manufacturing uses such as cold storage, warehousing, food production, things of that nature. So now we're kind of getting into even more ideas to think about as we put together a proposal that could, woo the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, as well as be realistic and successful when it comes to servicing the customer base in this neighborhood, in this community. So something to be mindful of. But more details in the next paragraph here. At 6.1 acres, this site would be ideal for a grocery anchored mixed retail development. So grocery, retail, personal services, or some combination thereof have been requested and would be supported by the surrounding community. All right, so more good gems that are being dropped in this proposal that we are considering to put together and submit for the DEGC to review. It has to incorporate potentially a grocery, restaurant, personal services, or some combination thereof, due to the feedback that the DEGC has received from the community. Respondents are encouraged to propose creative development scenarios that are financially feasible, very important, responsive to market conditions. This is a different time with the current administration freezing certain dollars that we once had access to. That in turn could make it more challenging. Interest rates are a bit higher than they were 2-3 years ago. That can make it a bit challenging. Certain gap financing and subsidy dollars are not as available as they once were. And consider the surrounding development context. The city will work with the developer on any rezoning or other entitlement needed to enable a successful project. This is a little different than the former golf course, which was 22 acres. This has a submission date for May 16th, 2025. You don't have a lot of time to put together a play for this opportunity. And so if you're really serious about this development, you really want to put your wheels in motion now, with hopes that you can really make a splash when it comes to the proposal you're putting together and submitting for DEGC to review, ultimately putting it in front of the community members to also consider as well. So you don't have a lot of time. but this is a really, really cool opportunity. So let's talk about what needs to be included within the proposal. You got to have an introduction letter. This is pretty much standard across the board. A description of the development team. You have to have a conceptual description of the proposed development. The more detailed your section 3 is, the better. So you need to hopefully have maybe a relationship with an architect that is willing to give you some type of high level design of your concept. Them in turn being able to do a bit of a code dive with regard to the zoning and seeing if your concept fits within that zoning parameter and what variables you may run into and things of that nature, right? So talking to GCs, getting a budget in line, you got to keep all of that in mind and really be mindful of those types of things that the city is going to be looking for from the development team that is submitting for this site. Document of the development team's equity capacity and other evidence of financing capacity required to complete the project. You have to do your best at being able to prove to your partners, in this example, DEGC, that you're capable of raising the equity that is needed from the developer team's side in order to make this happen, make this project a reality. Inclusion of any expected government contributions or support toward the project, such as tax abatements. Of course, you're going to need that, brownfield, so on and so forth. Proposed purchase price and conditions. Maybe you can find out how much they purchased the site for, if they did buy it from another entity at one time, and maybe you can kind of come close to what the city has paid for this site in order for you to convince them to give you an opportunity to redevelop the site, because the city is not really looking to make any money off of the sale of this site. They're looking to help generate, taxes in one form or another, whether it be a business that is located here, residents, the actual developer slash landlord being able to generate some form of activity at this site, which ultimately helps the city in a number of ways. Preliminary financial sources and uses of capital statement for the proposed development that shows all sources of funds to be used for the project, and a line item budget that shows their disbursement. Include any expectations for public subsidy, identified sources of subsidy or finance, and preliminary written letters of support. Also include letters of interest from equity and debt sources. And a pro forma that shows the operations of the projects for a minimum of 10 years. There is a pro forma that we have access to. So if you were to go to Michigan Economic Development Corporation's website, so miplace.org, and you find yourself at the Michigan Community Revitalization Program, MCRP, landing page, and you can see the link at the top of the screen here. You scroll down and you're going to have a number of resources that really guide you through how to put together a pro forma. But here's one of the most important resources you have as a commercial developer here in the city of Detroit and in the state of Michigan, especially if you're needing to gain access to brownfield support, MCRP dollars, so on and so forth. But you click on the MCRP application and pro forma workbook, and that downloads a pro forma in the form of an Excel document that you have access to. Completed statement of qualifications that incorporates examples of what you've been able to do that is similar to this project that you're putting a proposal together for. And my recommendation is to follow this flow exact. This has your sections that you just abide by. You don't have to do anything too fancy when it comes to the flow of it. This gives you the format, the order of operations that the proposal needs to incorporate in this manner. So make it easy on yourself, because there already are a lot of things that you got to put together for this proposal. But if they're asking you to provide certain things with a number next to them, follow that rule of thumb throughout your proposal. Scoring is obviously important. You got 20% weighted for the proposed team's experience. You got another 5% for local hiring / participation. This is interesting. The larger site, the 22-acre former golf course, local hiring / participation at much higher weight than what we're seeing here, which is at 5%. So, and I think they had a lower weight for the proposed team experience, if I'm not mistaken. Site development strategy, I think, was at 40% for the larger site. This is at 25%. Financial leverage and capacity and bid price at 25%. Project design standards at 15%. Bid price at 10%. And that equates out to 100%. So that's intriguing how the criteria for these two different projects are different with regard to what the DEGC is grading your proposal at. And that is something to be mindful of. So this has a list of specific uses that will be prohibited by the development agreement that you're going to sign if you win this property. And so even though there are a number of things that M4 allows you to do, the city is like, look, we're not allowing certain things, even if the location is zoned for a particular use. For an example, a massage parlor, topless club, strip joint, exotic or erotic dance club. The city of Detroit, more specifically DEGC, says, nada. That's not happening if we're working with you to bring this site to fruition. Be mindful of that as well. So this timeline is a little bit more brisk than the previous timeline of the larger site once again. So looks like they will be doing interviews really quickly on this site, May 22nd. So the due date is May 16th. They're going to jump right into talking to potential development teams and businesses who are interested in redeveloping the site. Final selection is June 16th with the notification of a winning developer on June 23rd. That's pretty much right around the corner. This is an interesting exhibit here. It looks like the city already did a little bit of work on the site, giving us an opportunity to come up with what could be, right? So they've already done a massing breakdown where, you have, looks like retail. And that's a lot of parking, isn't it? So, the thing about the city of Detroit's parking requirements, and this is not just the city of Detroit, but we have to figure out ways to lessen the amount of parking required for these types of developments. Now, with that said, if this is all retail, this is still a ton of parking that I am not too fond of, to a point where I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to convince the city to provide a variance if in fact you were to go with this exact layout, diminishing the number of parking spots required for even this layout here. That's just a ton of parking lot space. So they even have the ability for us to do a little deep dive into the framework plan that the city of Detroit did some time ago. This is back in 2018. And if you don't have a lot of time to do your community engagement the way you would like to before you submit your proposal, this gives us the ability to understand certain aspects about the community that we're wanting to develop within, which is extremely, extremely important. One of the things that really helps take a proposal to the next level is when you get the letters of support from these different community associations that represent the neighborhood that you're wanting to build within. And, these types of framework deep dives really help us understand certain things about the area without having to go and talk to the community as of yet. But it is important to be mindful of the fact that this was done in 2018 and this is pre-COVID. Post-COVID, consumer behavior has changed a little bit, and the things that were important to a resident in 2018 who may have had to drive to work 5 days a week now may have a little bit more flexibility and they in turn may look at things that are in their neighborhood a slight bit different. They may not want as much noise and commotion within their community because they're spending potentially even more time in their community due to the fact that they have a flexible work schedule that allows for them to work from home. So be mindful of that and just understand that even though this is a really, really good starting point to understand the community, it's not the end all be all. You have to really, really stay consistent and be very aggressive, understanding what the community wants to see out of the site that they live, walk, bike past on a daily basis. So there you have it, folks. A big opportunity to shape a critical gateway in the southwest neighborhood of the city of Detroit. Big fan of this lot, big fan of this development opportunity. Shout out to the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation for putting together this request, as this is going to draw out a number of the local developers that have the ability to knock a project out such as this one, and including myself. I'm really intrigued with the opportunities here and something that I'm really pondering putting together a play for. I've already started doing a little research on the retail side of the site, as I think that really makes or breaks this project, making sure you have the right commercial tenant and or tenants and or mix, which in a way could complement the neighborhood as well as the residential units that you potentially want to incorporate in a site such as this. But you may not even incorporate residential units. If with the right tenant, with the right partner, commercial partner, this may be a 100% retail project. But these are the things that you kind of think through as you put together a play for a site such as this. But what are your thoughts? Are you considering putting together a proposal for this site? How much are you familiar with Southwest Detroit? What are your thoughts on concepts for this site? Let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to respond back to you, as this is definitely on my radar, and I can't wait to see what transpires from and what comes from this RFP process at this site. So I'll see you in the next video.